try to mix in some of your questions too. So finally, we are going to begin with an opening statement from the speakers in support, the pro side, and speaking in support is Mayor Darrell Steinberg. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, Paula, for and the League of Women Voters for once again doing such a public service and moderating a civil forum here on a very important issue in our community. And glad to be joined by my new colleague, Councilmember Valenzuela, and she will handle all the questions very, very well. As I said, I have to make my statement and stay for a little bit and then leave. I feel very strongly about this policy. And by the way, I should say we have not made a final decision as a city council. Several weeks ago, we stated our intent and indicated a direction, but there's plenty of time to make sure that as we do what we intend to do, that we do it right and we do it with your concerns in mind. And I would start out my opening argument by asking this question, and I ask this respectfully and rhetorically. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? Because this is what the city seeks to do. We face an enormous affordable housing crisis in Sacramento. It is not an exaggeration to say that the only thing that holds us back from all of the demonstrable progress in Sacramento, including maintaining the high quality of life in our neighborhoods, is the fact that so many people are either on the streets and are living in very fragile conditions. We just got $31 million from the federal and state government, and it won't be enough to provide rental assistance for people who have fallen behind on their rents due to COVID. Over the long term, when you look at the growth of Sacramento, which whether you agree with it or not, we can't stop. People are coming to this city because they want to live here, and that's a good thing. And we're creating a lot of new industry, a lot of clean, green jobs. It's an exciting time for Sacramento. We must build more workforce and affordable housing. And we have a moral obligation, in my view, to address the decades-long reality in our city that we created lower income neighborhoods in Sacramento, in part as a result of intentional discrimination and redlining. What does this policy seek to do? It doesn't allow the construction of big apartment complexes or monolithic structures, or I'll use the term pejoratively, ugly, low quality, multifamily housing projects that are going to drag down the neighborhood. Just the opposite. It allows up to fourplexes by right, where duplexes are currently allowed by right. Radical change? I don't think so. Why is this important? Because as Paula Lee said in her introduction, we cannot rely only on the new construction of single family housing if we're going to meet the affordable housing demand in the city. We need more ADUs, which we have enabled and allowed by virtue of policy several years ago. We need this policy. We need a robust affordable housing trust fund that started at $30 million, but we need to grow to $100 million or more so that we can subsidize more quality affordable housing. That's what we have to do. And by the way, we should do it in a way that makes us proud about creating genuine economic integration and of course, racial and ethnic integration in all of our neighborhoods of Sacramento. Where not enough of that, frankly, exists. I know it was not intentional, but I was struck by a quote from one of the neighborhood leaders in the Sacramento Bee article that introduced this topic, where they said something like, and I paraphrase, even if people can't live in Land Park, they can certainly play in the park. Well, the city that I love, the city that you've elected me now 9 times over 25 years, the city that has elected me twice as mayor, believes that we can have beautiful neighborhoods as we do, like Land Park in Elmhurst and other neighborhoods, and at the same time, provide genuine ladders of opportunity and housing opportunity for all of our people. How do we deal with, what do I have? Oh, that's the 5 minutes.
No, yep, that was 5 minutes.
Wow. I'm going to let Councilmember Valenzuela.
That's 5 minutes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Mayor, thank you for being here. Stay as
Thank
long
you.
as you can.
Thank you for having me.
We'll move to opening statement from Maggie Coulter and Luree Stetson. 5 minutes.
So I will start. Thank you for your comments, Mayor Steinberg. The General Plan 2040 proposal to eliminate single-family neighborhoods and on-site parking mandates will be harmful to Sacramento residents. State law, as you pointed out, already allows 2 accessory dwelling units, ADUs or in-law units, on every residential parcel. This proposed upzoning means that 6 unit apartments, not fourplexes, would be allowed on single-family lots by right with no on-site parking. These apartments can be 3-story boxes, as the city has no architectural design standards, only adjustable setback and lot coverage provisions. The city has falsely claimed that eliminating moderate density, predominantly single-family neighborhoods will create more affordable housing. It will not, and there is evidence for that in other cities. The city's claim that neighborhoods remain racially segregated because of single-family zoning is both racist and false. To infer that people of color would rather rent in Land Park than own their own home is offensive and denies the economic benefits that homeownership offers to moderate and lower income families. And what about those moderate and lower income Sacramentans who now own homes in established, less affluent single-family neighborhoods? Should they be denied the ability to continue to live in a less dense environment? If the city council is serious about equity and social justice, then there must be a real commitment to making every Sacramento neighborhood a desirable place to live. This proposal will be a boon to outside investors and absentee landlords who will tear down or convert existing single-family housing stock to market rate rentals. This proposal will initially have its most devastating impact on less affluent neighborhoods. Rather than preventing displacement, the proposed general plan will exacerbate gentrification in neighborhoods like Oak Park. There are ample vacant lots and underutilized commercial and state properties that can be designed to accommodate higher density development without eliminating Sacramento's diverse single-family neighborhoods. Neighborhoods that offer more stability, greenery, and a calmer lifestyle than the increasingly urbanized Midtown. Luree.
Thank you. Luree Stetson with Upper Land Park Neighbors. I've worked for the state as a legislative advocate and as an executive to improve the effectiveness of state programs. I've been a neighborhood activist for over 25 years and seen a lot of policy changes within the city, some good, some not good. However, the city, unlike the state government, has no independent entity that reviews its proposals and decisions. It rests with us, the public, to get involved and point out problems and suggest improvements to city proposals. That's why we're here tonight. There are several major problems with this proposal based on experience in other cities. And I want to share with you some of my general plan experience with the city. They've adopted several affordable housing strategies that have not been successful, which was recognized by Katie when she ran for office. In 2014, the council removed the 20% affordable requirement for large development projects. The staff stated it wasn't working because developers were placing affordable units on the edge of large developments rather than integrating them throughout a development. So they eliminated that requirement for the developers at the developer's request, I think. Then they implemented an in lieu affordable housing fee that was more agreeable. to the developers, which that fee was given to the housing authority to build more affordable housing. Unfortunately, that hasn't built much affordable housing because the fee was too low and the housing authority's construction costs are much higher than a private developer. And this was known when the fee was adopted by the council. And I might point out, this was before Darrell and Katie were on the council. Then in 2016, the city adopted a downtown rail yard specific plan, which I was following because I'm monitoring the West Broadway specific plan. In the downtown rail specific plan, the staff agreed with the developer's proposed amount of affordable housing, 600 units out of 10,000. That it seems an unconscionable low percentage of affordable housing for the largest development west of the Mississippi. So this year's general plan update.
Believe it or not,
Oh,
it's
stop.
5 minutes.
All right. Anyway, these are laudable goals. I would argue that there's nothing in the general plan that ensures the goals are achieved, and that's what needs to be addressed.
So just as we go through this, good idea to keep your eyes on the lady in
Yeah,
the
sorry.
the purple
I'm new
shirt,
to
the
this.
purple glasses. Looks like you have a pink house there, Claudia.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the lighting.
Yes,
I think it's very flattering though.
yes, it is. Yes. So keep your eye on the timer, folks. So first question, this question actually came in 2 parts: who would benefit and who would be harmed. So I'll just ask you both. I'll ask it together. If you can answer it together, who would benefit from the general plan 2040 proposal to convert single-family neighborhoods to multifamily by allowing multifamily structures up to 6 units on single-family lots? Katie, or Mayor, wherever.
No. It's, I'm going to excuse myself. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Joining us.
Thank
And
you.
if I could be totally selfish in this
Thank you,
response,
Mr. Mayor.
when you ask who's going to benefit from this, my first answer is me. I'm a renter in Midtown. I'm a young professional. I make good money. And I'm not sure if any of you saw Tony Bijak's article today in the Bee that was titled Inside Sacramento's Wild Real Estate Market, where homes sell in hours and buyers have no shot. And this is the reality for a lot of us in Sacramento. Unless we can find a way to dramatically increase supply, when we have a regional housing needs assessment that says we're 45,000 units short of what we know we're going to need and 17,000 units short of affordable housing, there is simply no way to solve this problem without increasing supply. Now, I admit that just increasing supply is not enough. And the work that lies ahead of us in this general plan by revisiting the very questions that Luree just raised when it comes to the affordability policies, the requirements for developers, we adopted a fee that was a fraction. That Nexus study said we could go up to $15 a square foot. We did $3. I mean, and we were a fraction of what we knew we needed to do back then. And there's so much we know about what's working in other cities and in other places when it comes to increasing affordability. So this alone will not solve it, but we cannot solve it unless we figure out a way to dramatically increase the number of units that are available both for rent and for purchase in the city. Thank you.
So I'll take this. So who would benefit, I think, are outside investors and absentee landlords. And I'm talking about eliminating single family zoning. Clearly, there needs to be more housing added. There's plenty of vacant land to do that. Specifically, though, eliminating single family zoning, allowing 6-unit apartments on every single family lot is not going to do anything about affordable housing unless there's a mandate. And the mandate should really be effective in terms of these large multifamily projects that some of which are already online. I also want to quote University of Vancouver professor who just wrote a book on this, saying that after studying what happened with upzoning in Vancouver, we can conclude there's a problem beyond restrictive zoning. No amount of restrictive zoning or allowing for development will cause prices to go down. This going in and basically turning single family neighborhoods into multifamily neighborhoods is not going to solve the crisis. And what it actually is going to do is eliminate homeownership opportunities. So it actually is going to harm people who want to move up, who want to buy houses, because there's going to be less housing stock. It also is going to harm people in neighborhoods like Oak Park, where investors will come in, properties are cheaper, buy these houses up, knock them down or convert them to 6-unit apartments and displace the people that live there. So this really is harmful. This proposal is not going to benefit Sacramentans.
I think your time's up. So we'll begin this question with the opposed side. Has the city of Sacramento determined housing capacity of existing vacant or underutilized land already zoned for commercial use?
Luree?
If so, what is that capacity? And if not, why not?
Is that question for Katie or?
You.
Oh, so in my experience working with the city, we have looked at commercial corridors and other areas to put higher density, and the city adopted policies to do that along all the commercial corridors. I'm not sure if they've actually identified the amount of housing that could be located on some of the what we call strip malls and things like that that are underutilized and would create more of a neighborhood focus along some of these commercial corridors, such as Freeport Boulevard by the airport and other areas. And I would expect the city to do an analysis like that to determine where the future locations, where future housing could be located, whether it's affordable or not. And that's one of the things that I suggested that the city do in addition with this general plan.
Katie?
Yeah, that is what's coming. So part of the reason we needed to vote on draft land use maps like this was to inform that kind of analysis. It's hard to do that analysis if we haven't talked about density. And, you know, we did a lot of changes with floor area ratios and all sorts of stuff that are ongoing discussions about, but that's going to help inform the estimate of what we can do and what we think we can handle within our existing city boundaries. But I do want to land on something that, I mean, I don't think either side here disagrees on. And so I really want to make sure to emphasize this. I do not agree with doing this change without any assurances that we're protecting and putting in programs in place to protect current renters and homeowners from being forced out, and that we're not ensuring that there's affordability requirements. What's happening in Midtown when someone quad splits a lot and sells each new unit for $800,000 is not going to help our housing crisis. But I do think that there is a provision that we can't get there unless we figure out supply. And so these two conversations to me are inextricably linked. We can't get there if we don't increase supply, and this increasing supply isn't going to help if we don't have the affordable policies that are going to prohibit the type of speculation and the type of just gross exploitation really of property owners in Sacramento that we've been seeing really in the last several years. And so I don't disagree on that point. And I think part of what's coming now with our housing element and with all the work that lies ahead in the general plan is how do we make this work to ensure we actually have the right housing for the right need.
Rebuttal from, and that's, thank you for reminding me, Luree, that's just hold your finger up there like that if you have a rebuttal. So Claudia, rebuttal from Luree.
Okay, I've started the clock.
So I'm
starting the
happy to
clock.
hear that, but it's more than the economics of the rental market. It's also the insurance that existing affordable housing isn't eliminated, no net loss. It's also looking at economic opportunities. It's also looking at density around transit. None of that's connected in this general plan.
Can we move on?
Well, Kate, does
Okay.
Katie want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, a
Okay.
simple answer of not yet. It's not connected yet. And that's, I mean, this land use map was just literally step 2, I think, of step like 5 or 6 that we have to take. And that's the work that's ahead of us. And that's the commitment that I'm making. I used to live in Oak Park. I was displaced from Oak Park. Was a homeowner of color who ended up having to sell my home. This is very real for me. And oh, sorry, go ahead. I just thought
These are quick. These are quick. And,
Yeah,
and remember, let me just say to both all of you that, you know, with these questions, you will have an opportunity to repeat your points. I know it. Right. I mean, so
Right,
I
well, I have a rebuttal to
to Katie.
think based on
Okay,
what you-
15 seconds. Claudia.
Got it?
based on what you've said, Katie, I think it's premature then to be saying that single family zoning should be eliminated and 6-unit apartments should be allowed on every single family lot. It sounds like this is the cart before the horse. A solution has been thrown up without the evidence that it's even needed.
Next question, we begin with Katie. What is the impact on infrastructure, water, sewer, roads of the general plan 2040 upzoning of single family to allow increased density?
Thanks. And that's a great question. And just to make super clear, because I think the language is really important, we're not eliminating single family zoning. There's nothing in this change. It finally adopted. And so this was a proposed change that hasn't even been adopted yet by the council, right? That's all coming. That would just say that if you wanted to, you could, but you could still build a single family home. You could still buy and sell single family homes in this neighborhood. Nothing will force that to go away. But similarly, the buildings that will come in are very similar to the buildings that could be there now. And I know there's questions about design standards, which Maggie brought up, which are really important. I think if there's changes we need to be making to design standards, let's talk about that, because I think that's what's happening before these changes came up. I was hearing complaints from folks who were having 3-story buildings built next to them that were single family buildings, that someone was just building a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom house next door. All this means is that that same house that could be built today could be subdivided. Now, I know folks are worried because infrastructure in Sacramento is really old and we have a big problem ahead of us. And sitting on the water committee and sitting on the sewer and all these different committees that I'm on now, I know that there's a lot of plans in place for how are we going to upgrade and obviously pay for the necessary infrastructure improvements we need to make. But again, those are all this is the 3-dimensional chessboard that's in front of us right now. And that is a big piece of the conversation. There's really great staff working on that strategy to ensure that our communities' sewer needs, water needs, other infrastructure needs are continuing to be updated and met.
I'm going to say something, then you can go, Luree. This is a thing obfuscating on the part of the city, and I wish you wouldn't do it. When we talk about eliminating single family neighborhoods, if you put multifamily structures, 6-unit structures, then it's no longer a single family neighborhood. So we're not talking about that you can't build single family houses. So I think the city's, stuff about that is inaccurate and misleading. When you go in and you say every unit can have a 6-unit, every lot can have a 6-unit apartment, that is not a single family low density neighborhood. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. And Luree, did you want to comment on infrastructure?
Yeah, and also there's no limitation on the number of units that could go into an older neighborhood, especially low income neighborhoods, which would totally transform it into multiplexes, which I'm sure the city doesn't want to have happen. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we still have time on this. I think that it's really important to be honest with people about what the city is proposing. And what I'm hearing you say is that there's this idea we need affordable housing. I worked in the field of affordable housing. I absolutely agree. But let's find out, do we need to get rid of our single family low density neighborhoods in order to do that? I don't think we do. And I don't think the city has proved that we need to do that. They haven't done the assessment of how many units are available or they can be built on vacant lots. And they haven't assessed whether infrastructure can handle this.
Okay, we'll start with you, Maggie and Luree. If the draft general plan 2040 were adopted as proposed, what would prevent gentrification and displacement of lower and moderate income renters in neighborhoods such as Oak Park?
Well, and I think this is a very serious question about who would be harmed. Because the truth is Oak Park, which is now going to be more impacted by Aggie Square, already is being gentrified. So you take a housing stock, which is less expensive than other areas. Again, who's going to benefit from this are outside investors and absentee landlords that can come in and knock down or convert existing single family homes to 6-unit apartments. And let's stop talking about fourplexes. If you zone a property for a fourplex, by law, they can add 2 more accessory dwelling units. 4 + 2 is 6. So it's not a fourplex, it's a sixplex. And I think there aren't provisions to prevent gentrification, which is already happening. And if people are displaced from Oak Park or other vulnerable neighborhoods that are impacted by this, they're not going to be able to afford these rental units in Land Park or East Sac or even in my neighborhood. Rents are going up here. There's a duplex on the corner here that was half, 2 years ago, the rent was half what it is now. And you want to know who lives in that house? Who just moved into that house? People that just moved up here from the Silicon Valley. So putting in these units in this neighborhood and these other neighborhoods, that is not going to help people, other people who are in Sacramento, who are low and moderate income households. And I think the city's got to be honest about that, because it's not going to do that.
I'm glad we keep using Oak Park as an example, as someone who spent a lot of years of my time in Sacramento going door to door and organizing and living in Oak Park, but in the time I wasn't in Midtown. It's a neighborhood I care quite a bit about. And I think it's important for us to not conflate also, right? And so what I am saying, and if you hear me sounding redundant, it's because I feel like my point might be getting missed, and I don't want us to mistake that this proposal was not finalized. So what you're hearing now is the council saying, hey, we're interested in this, we want your input, and that's what we're doing. The next step in this process is going to be the analysis of available units and affordability needs. We're going to continue to fine tune the zoning, and eventually there'll be a decision about whether we make this final, if there's more tweaks made, and what other changes we might need to make to ensure vision is real. I hope that every person on this call who is concerned about displacement will join me in fighting for rent control. I hope that every person on this call will join me in fighting for stronger developer requirements, so that every single person on this call who was saying that the reason you are concerned is affordability requirements, let us work together on that. Let's make that real. Let's make it binding. Let's make our city the model of community opportunity to purchase, the model of homeowner assistance, the model of the things that we know developers and don't want in the city, and that we haven't been able to successfully do despite decades of evidence that we're not doing enough. But the other scenario here that we can't forget is the scenario where a homeowner splits their unit and rents out the other side. The scenario here where they build an ADU and they rent it out, and that process itself may enable them to better afford staying in their home and their community. And that is another scenario that we need. Oh, sorry. I keep going. Sorry, I got wound up, Paula. Continue.
Well, so just keep that thought. You can make that point with another question. And this is for you to begin this one. The January 19th staff report.
Wait, no, I have a rebuttal.
Oh, a rebuttal.
Yeah. So currently homeowners can add 2 ADUs. So why do we need to up that to 6 units? That's doubling what they can do now. So
You have an answer, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, an ADU sometimes is a garage, sometimes it's new construction. Allowing someone to do a duplex or triplex in their existing building is another option that I think they should have on the table.
And just so you know, that's exactly what can be done with the ADU ordinance. In fact, around the corner here, a new development, it's a duplex, and it's in a single family lot. And the reason they're doing a duplex is because they're using an ADU as one of those. So that can be done now.
Katie?
Yeah.
Can you give us a picture of what this will look like in practice? How will the appearance of these new duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes differ from the look of buildings nearby?
That's a great question, Paula, because one of the things that I want to emphasize is that it would look exactly like buildings that could be built in your neighborhoods right now. Nothing in this plan at this moment is changing any design standards. And again, I reiterate, and I've said this at other forums in the past, if folks want to talk about the design standards in this general plan, let's talk about it. Let's talk about ensuring that windows and facades and the things look like the neighborhood. But the reality is that we're not changing that in this ordinance, that a building that could be built next door to you today is the same building that could be built under this change if adopted by the council. It would only be a matter of how many units was in that building by right. There are certain things that you can do with ADUs. There are certain duplexes that are allowed by right, but going up to a quadplex just enables a type of flexibility for a property owner, which could be an outside investor, right? Could also be any of you on this call who are lucky enough to be property owners. If you decided to split up your home or to rebuild your home into more units, that it would enable you to do that as long as you are consistent with the standards that are already in place.
So was that a question? So we're going to respond to that. I'm confused about where we are. Was that a question?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will take that. So there are no design standards, okay? There is setbacks and there's lot coverage, and ADUs are exempt from lot coverage. So again, let's look at the reality of this. We're not talking about a fourplex. We are talking about 6 units. And so you take 6 units in any neighborhood, it's going to up the density 6 times. And these are narrow streets. They're, parking's an issue. You've already heard that infrastructure is an issue. So I don't see the value of severely increasing density in these existing neighborhoods. And you may say this isn't a done deal, but and I believe it's not a done deal, but the message and the staff report is fourplexes plus the 2 is 6 units. So that's what we're hearing. I didn't hear any flexibility in the staff report or any consideration about why don't we see if the ADU ordinance can work. And again, Sacramentans, some people want to live in moderate density neighborhoods. That's moderate income people, lower income people, upper income people across the spectrum. And there are many single family neighborhoods in Sacramento, which are not in affluent areas. And those people want to live in a lower density neighborhood. So basically, this takes away that choice. This says, okay, we're going to start having 6 unit apartments, and pretty soon it's going to be much more urbanized like Midtown. Sacramento should have the choice. Sacramento should have the choice of lower density or moderate density neighborhoods.
I think a rebuttal, Paula, sorry. I mean, it's important because this change isn't requiring anything. It is giving property owners choice, and up to 6 units, could be 2, could be 3. Just saying because 6 is possible doesn't mean that every single property on your block is going to convert to 6. And if we're going to keep speaking on behalf of other neighborhoods that aren't here tonight, I would really prefer to have their consent. If we're going to speak on behalf of Meadowview, on behalf of Oak Park, on behalf of any neighborhood, let's try to keep this about the neighborhoods who are here, because I'd really like to hear from them directly. If we're going to say we're advocating for these changes on their behalf, and knowing those neighborhood leaders personally, I just want to say that I would like to have that conversation separately. So let's keep this about Elmhurst and Upperland Park, if that's okay.
Okay, so let's.
You know what? I think we actually do have to go to 30-second rebuttals, because these rebuttals are taking too long, and you're making.
Sorry, Paula.
you're making good points. I mean, in both cases, I didn't want to stop you, but I was hoping they could be shorter. So Claudia.
I got it. I got the message.
Thank you. So this
We
is
get a
no,
15-second warning, or just no warning? Just stop. 30 seconds, then stop.
stop. Don't take the 30 seconds if you
Okay.
don't need it.
Okay, so the reality is that you open the
wait.
door. I'm responding. I'm rebutting her question, what she just
Okay.
said. So
Oh,
you open the door for 6 unit apartment buildings to be built, and you want to say, oh, it's up to the owner or whoever. And yes, you've acknowledged that outside investors will come in. Let's look at reality. What's happened in Midtown? Single family houses were taken down and apartments would go up. Apartments do not, 6 unit apartments do not look like single family houses. So let's, this is like, it's a fantasy here. Oh, you're just going to have these small single family houses, and all of a sudden they're going to have 6 times the number of people. They're not going to look any different. They're not going to have any impact on the neighborhood. That is simply not true.
You know, if we want to talk about design standards, again, like I don't want to keep using things that I'm offering and that the council I know is very open and reiterated over and over again in our discussion about this. If we want to talk about design standards, we are open to making that a part of this conversation. I really want to keep it to the issue that we're talking about, which is the zoning change, because that is a question and a very valid point that we desperately want to adopt. And if the neighborhood has recommendations on that, we'd love to hear about that.
So the recommendation, oh, go, Luree, go ahead.
So Katie, that's very good that they're open, but here's the problem. When this is being proposed by staff and various neighborhood associations submitted options, the staff said they couldn't accept them because the council was adamant about R1 zoning. So my concern is that the council hasn't looked at other options. They've only looked at R1 zoning. And that's not going to get you to where you want to be. You need to look at social, economic, and your land trust options, home ownership. This is all about rentals, and it's not going to accomplish what I know you want to accomplish.
Thank you. Okay, next question, and I think we're starting with Maggie and Luree on this one. SMUD has advised Sacramento residents to limit electricity use in the summer because they don't have capacity for everyone to run their air conditioners during a heat wave. If everyone converts to electricity, how will there be enough without overloading old transformers?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. As a former lobbyist for the municipal utilities, of which SMUD was one of our biggest members, I can tell you their infrastructure cannot handle this. So I don't know what the city has done to evaluate that possibility. Plus the other thing is whether the city has done a cost benefit analysis, because it will add more cost to a new home, and that is passed on to the homeowner. And I'm sure that's not what you want to see. So I'm concerned that SMUD won't be able to deal with the quick application of all electric in the years that you've identified, and think that it may be over ambitious.
Katie?
Yeah, this is a perfectly timed question because you're tapping into whoever asked it has been paying attention to Planning Commission and knows that there's an electrification ordinance being discussed. And this is the exact conversation we've been having with SMUD, with PG&E. Where's the infrastructure gaps? Where do we know we need improvements? What resources are available? So you want to stick somebody with an 11 grand tab because they want to switch to electric and find out they need a panel upgrade or they need all this other work done. So I've actually been nudging, not because I don't support electrification as quickly as we can, but I want to delay the ordinance a little bit because I think we could do a good job if we plan and if we invest. This could be a jobs recovery strategy. We've got federal money coming down for infrastructure. We could really do a cool job and weatherize homes while we're in there and help them electrify if we do it in a strategic and planned out way, which is what I'm hoping Sacramento, frankly, could lead the state. No other jurisdiction's really done it that way, but I think that we're in a unique position because we have SMUD and we're just blessed because we have SMUD that maybe we could figure out a way to do that and also upgrade the infrastructure that we all need upgraded in general while planning for that future, because we want to be clean. We want to help address the public health challenges that come with having gas appliances, especially in apartments like mine where the ventilation is awful, so that we can help address those health concerns as well as our climate targets, which are really aggressive. And I think we could meet if we do that right.
I think, again, this speaks to the premature nature of this plan, which is that there are these issues that are unresolved. And the comments that you made, well, there are no design review standards, but all of a sudden now we're going to come up with design review standards in the next several months when this plan is supposed to be adopted. We know the infrastructure isn't there. We know there are issues with that. So it seems to me that this really is premature.
I mean, again, nothing's been decided yet. And I want to stress that if we do what I am hoping that we do, which I know that Luree and Maggie would like to see done when it comes to the affordability requirements, you're not going to see a massive wave of out-of-city investors who are coming in to make a ton of money if we say these units have to be affordable, or here's the developer fee if you're going to do this. I think we can slow this down by ensuring that it's more equitable at the front. And so I just want to be real that like nothing's going to happen to your property unless you say you want that to happen. And I hope that we can put requirements in place that'll help curtail that massive speculation challenge that we frankly have had since the foreclosure crisis.
Thank you. You know, what we can't, you guys, you know, our audience wants to hear their questions asked.
Mhm.
So if we do too many 30-second rebuttals, we're just running out of time. So I'd like to ask, I just am looking at some of these questions, so I think we need to proceed that way, even though I have other questions that were sent in advance. Maggie and Luree, what about the council's moral responsibility to require minimum amounts of low cost or affordable housing in each development? What about the council's responsibility to regulate all development in order to protect the most vulnerable among us?
I'm not sure what the question is focused on. I do know that the city has eliminated a lot of the affordable housing requirements for developers over the years. As I mentioned, in 2014, they eliminated the 20% affordability. 20% of the units in a development had to be affordable. And when staff told me it was because it wasn't working, because they were putting all the low-income people in multi-family apartments on the edge of a development, I said, well, that's simple to fix. You just change the ordinance and tell them to integrate the apartments throughout the development. So it was sort of an excuse to get rid of that requirement. Also because the city was being told that developers weren't going to build unless the affordable housing was reduced or eliminated. So now we're going back. And now we need to go back and look at that. So it sort of reminds me of the 1960s when the city did away with the West End on the west side of 10th Street, and they kicked out all of the neighborhoods there, the Japanese, the Mexicans, the Blacks, and said they were all underutilized and needed to be removed. And they kicked all those people out. They kicked 50,000 residential units out of downtown. Now they're trying to bring them back. So we really need to be serious about that.
Luree, you guys watch the timer.
Okay.
Katie.
Thanks, Paula, and thanks, Luree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The city has a massive obligation on affordable housing that we've essentially abdicated. It's not rocket science that in the last 6-7 years, we built 2 units for extremely low income folks. And those are the folks that, I mean, if you're lucky enough to get someone who's on the street, enrolled in their benefits and on SSI and doing well on a minimum wage job, that's the unit that they need to move into. And if we've built 2, it's no rocket science that folks who are at risk of becoming homeless, folks who are trying to get off of the street, have no place to go. And so I think we've learned a lot over this last 6 years of essentially like no affordable housing policy, even the streamlining ordinance. Sorry, I thought I had a minute and a half.
I'm sorry. I thought that was a rebuttal.
No, it's okay. I was like, wait a minute, that was so quick. So even the streamlining ordinance, so like several of you have interacted with like the SB 35 ministerial approval process, which is so frustrating because the state law actually did that because it wanted to facilitate affordable housing developments, not just any Joe Schmo developer who wants to come in and build market rate. And so the city's been so hands off with development. Please, please, please come, please build here, please do more, that we've really done it at complete cost to the community who's lived here. A city is not a city without the people who are here. And when we have 50% of our city is renters, and that's growing, when we have so many people that are housing burdened, like it's an absolute abdication of our responsibility not to do more. And that's why I'm pushing that in this year and hope you all will join me.
A rebuttal.
I
Quickly.
appreciate you're saying that this was done at the cost of the people. That's exactly what this is. This is going to be done at the cost of people who live in these predominantly single family, lower density neighborhoods. And you say, well, you're going to go in and you can do whatever you want with your house. Do you realize this is about what happens in the neighborhood, not just what you do with your house, but what happens with all the other houses?
Katie, can you please explain how allowing more multifamily dwellings like apartments and duplexes increase home ownership versus just increasing more renters?
That's a great question, because I think part of the policy that I'm interested in is not making these necessarily always rentals. There's a real option where we could make this ownership and really look at what other cities do. I mean, where you could buy, I would love to buy, I'm a single woman. I live in my apartment with my 2 little dogs. I would love to buy like a duplex or triplex size home would be perfect for me. I don't need a full home, but I do want to own, because I recognize it's important for me to be able to build that equity. And so I think part of what this does is there's a necessary, and like I said, I do not believe that just increasing supply will reduce costs. There's a seemingly endless stream of folks coming from the Bay. That's not going to be enough, but you can't decrease costs if we don't also increase supply, because the fact is, as we said in the B today, houses are selling within hours. There was a house listed for 300 grand. Imagine this. A lot of you bought your houses, right? Imagine a house listed at 300 grand. Great, I can afford that. You want to know what it sold for 5 hours later? $467,000. That is not a market that any of us can compete in. We've got to alleviate the pressure that reduced supply is causing, but we have to do it thoughtfully, which is where the housing element policies, the affordability requirements, the developer requirements, and the opportunities to buy could really come in. But we have to recognize as well, 50% of the city is renters. And I know a lot of you might not live near renters, but as a renter, I think we have to plan for them too. And they need a place to go too. And so like, there's a real opportunity to also talk about property management and rental housing inspection, because some of those crappy rentals that I have also lived in deserve more accountability, but that's a separate question. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you just restate the question? She just answered the question. Can you restate it?
Oh, let's see.
Sorry, repeat it.
I went past it. Just a minute.
It was about creating home ownership opportunities. Okay.
Please
well,
explain specifically how allowing more multifamily dwellings increases home ownership versus just increasing more renters.
Okay, I'll take this and then Luree, you can jump in.
As
What
quick as
you just said, Katie, shows that it does not do that. So you get to buy your house and turn it into a duplex and rent out those 2. So that's 1 home ownership person, 1 home ownership, and 2 rentals. And there is an implication here that people don't like renters. That is absolutely absurd. I'm sure that half or 60% of our neighborhood is renters. All our neighbors are renters. We have a very friendly neighborhood. We just welcome new neighbors into the neighborhood who are renters. Long-term renters do help with neighborhood stability. And in order to do that, obviously you have to have stability in terms of rent. So I'm with you on that. But again, you don't have to eliminate predominantly single family neighborhoods to do that. This is a very, it's a predominantly, there are duplexes here. There are some apartments on part of it. People are doing ADUs, but you don't have to come in here and put a 6-unit apartment building on every lot and change the entire character of this neighborhood to A, provide affordable housing, because it won't do that, or B, to, diversify the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is becoming diverse. So I think again, this
Maggie, while you're talking, would you like to address the parking issue?
Sorry.
Would you like to address the parking issue? That's another question.
Is that, the parking?
Is this a question to, wait, is this a question to someone?
It's a question. I just thought she might as well just keep going.
Okay. All right. So the general plan, and again, what we have to go by is what the staff report said, and it calls for eliminating all city mandated parking. So in a neighborhood like this, where there are already cars parked on both sides of the street, you have increased density from ADUs. Now you're going to tell somebody you don't have to provide any on-site parking. And this is kind of I realize it's a sledgehammer approach to people to say, we don't want you driving, so we're not going to provide any parking and we're going to narrow streets. And I actually don't think that constituents want that. I mean, there's some advocates for that, but I think that the majority of Sacramentans probably don't want that. And they don't want you to say, okay, you have new businesses, new housing developments. We're not going to provide any parking for anybody. And again, this is what the staff report said. So that's what we have to go by. And the people listening here, that's what we were told from the city. So you're saying something different. Well, this isn't a done deal. We're still thinking about these things. Well, if somebody's thinking about those things, then why are they in there in the form that they're in there? This mandate that we're going to have 6 units in 6-unit apartment buildings in every single family lot, that we're not going to have any parking, that we're going to narrow streets, that we're going to make, restrict the amount of parking in some areas. These are very, significant changes. And I don't think that the city really has heard from people. We know they didn't do a random survey. They did a self-select survey, which is not a scientific study. It's not a random survey.
Okay, Katie.
Thanks. I think it's okay. I'm just trying to process my thoughts because there's a lot of really strong language being said. And so I keep feeling the need to be really clear that I don't think we'd be here tonight having this discussion if we hadn't put out a proposal, and that a lot of these details when it comes to how do we make safe streets for everyone, how much parking is the right amount of parking, how much is too much, because that's real estate that could be used for open space, for additional housing, for a whole range of things that could make a lot of sense for a neighborhood. Those are conversations that we are still having, and that's part of the reason that I'm here tonight. And part of the reason I keep saying genuinely, if you have ideas, if you have things you want to propose, I want to know, because eventually I'm one of the 9 people who's going to be voting on this final plan and wants to make sure it makes sense for everybody. If one size doesn't fit all, I live in Midtown. I think it's glorious that I live in a 7-unit building next door to a 6-unit building next door to a duplex across the street from 5 single-family homes. I think it makes our neighborhood better and interesting. And there was a problem with tearing down old historic homes that we addressed. We came in and we said, okay, we're going to put on a historic property thing. We're going to try to create mechanisms to limit that from happening. And that's what I mean in terms of nuance. I think when we start talking in terms of extremes, like mandating that everybody tear down their home and build 6 units, we lose the nuance that's really what a general plan could be, which is the type of zoning like we could get into parcel by parcel specifics, which we've offered to folks. Let's get into it and talk about where this might not make sense. And that's the conversation I think we could be having if we accept the fact that we're not going to get to our goals unless we find a way to build more housing. And this might be one way to get there.
So
Maggie, we're going to stop the rebuttals because we're running out of time. So
I just want one thing. I never said we are not talking about mandating that people build this stuff. The general plan opens the door to allow investors to come in. It's not a mandate. So that's incorrect use. It's not saying that somebody has to open the door.
Katie, should Sacramentans be allowed to vote on these changes?
Well, Sacramentans vote for us and we're voting on the changes. So I think that one could argue that it's a step removed. And folks like me who made a conscious choice and a commitment in my campaign not to take developer money, that I was running on a pro rent control platform, a pro affordable housing platform. I mean, that's a big part of the reason why I think I'm sitting here today as a council member, is because the people in my district wanted someone who was going to vote for what made most sense for the residents and not for someone's bottom line. So I think that this is part of the public process. And so the workshops that are going to come, the housing element workshops that have already been posted and are starting to begin, the work that we have ahead of us is going to inform that nuance. And the city planning staff, I've got to say, I have not seen them turn down one meeting. I have not seen them say that they won't come to one community meeting and talk about this and have a discussion. And I've seen them shift. Just in the 2 short months I've been here, I've raised concerns about historic homes. I've raised concerns about historic districts, and I've watched them incorporate that into what they're working on now. And so I really mean this when I say, let's figure out a way to make this work. If there needs to be parking, things need to be revisited, like again, design standards. I mean, we can list off the building electrification stuff. Let's talk about it, because I think we can't deny the crisis that we're in, the crisis that's touching all of us. And it bothers me that we need to, as a millennial who really desperately wants to make Sacramento my forever home, knowing that I'm constantly at risk of my building being sold and this rent changing, or what if they decide they want to make it condos, or what if they decide they're going going to bulldoze it. I want to own a home, even if it's a duplex, even if it's a triplex. And I think that we can make that happen in Sacramento, and wouldn't that be awesome? Thanks.
Maggie and Luree?
Do you want to take that, Luree? You want me to?
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Katie, and I know you're open to discussions and so forth, but I guess the real question is whether the council is open to some significant changes to the R1 zoning. And from my observation, they don't seem to be. They just want to make minor corrections based on what we give as feedback. And I agree with Maggie that the research hasn't been done on this by the staff before presenting it to you. And a better approach would have been to go out to the community and ask them, what do you think about these things? And we'd be having these conversations, and we would have developed the policy change together. But it was presented to us as something that was coming from leadership, and the changes that we asked for were never included or considered.
Luree,
So
do you think Sacramento should vote on this? Is the question.
I don't really have an opinion on that at this point.
Okay.
I'm hoping the council is going to be very flexible and change the R1 zoning to something that really works with economic development, social implications, and home ownership.
And I'll just say, I think Sacramentans should vote on this. The city council also thought we should have the strong mayor, and we didn't want it. We weren't allowed to vote on the arena. I think if had that gone to a vote of the people, we would have had a different outcome. I actually find it disturbing when the city council is unanimous on something. I feel like they're talking to each other and they're not talking to the people. And I know in your district, Katie, that you have a lot of constituents who are very concerned about this.
Katie, this question, well, starting with you, it's for everyone. Simply building more won't necessarily address affordability concerns. So what steps is the city taking to ensure the affordability needs will be met?
I love this question. And in fact, I'm talking to at least one person I think I saw on the Zoom about doing a workshop to talk about this in District 4. So for me, it's 3 buckets. How do you protect renters? How do you protect homeowners? And then how do you increase the stock of affordable housing that's available? So renter protections, not just rent control, but just making sure there's units available at different prices, which comes to my 3rd bucket, right? Homeowner protections. A lot of homeowners sell their homes, not always because they want to sell their homes. Some people want to cash in on that equity, and honestly, I'm not in a position to tell them they shouldn't do that. If they've been paying into their home and they see a $600,000 price tag and think that's an amazing opportunity, good for them. But if people are selling their home because they can't make improvements, because they can't afford to retrofit it for accessibility, that's a problem. We should have programs available to help, especially low-income homeowners, stay in place. And then the 3rd bucket comes to how do we bring more buildings in, which is both about building new affordable buildings, but it's also about bringing in existing buildings under deed restrictions, things like the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, things like the Sacramento Community Land Trust, really innovative ways that we could think about how do we take existing buildings, which are already built and are way cheaper than building new, and bring them into affordability so that we can protect that existing stock and we don't keep digging a hole for ourselves as we're trying to build and we're losing housing and we're trying to build more. We're never going to catch up at that rate. So for me, protecting affordability means those 3 things. And that's something that I'm hoping for in the housing element discussions that are starting here in the next few weeks.
Maggie and Luree, do you have any comments? This is the last question, then we'll be moving to closing statements.
Well, I want to go back to the elimination of predominantly single family neighborhoods. And, again, what you're talking about is somebody, an owner, renting out parts of their house, potentially an outside investor coming in, creating a 6-unit apartment building. How does that promote home ownership? It doesn't. It eliminates housing stock. And again, Sacramentans have chosen to live in these lower density. They're predominantly single family. They're also duplexes. They're ADUs. So going in there with this sledgehammer, and again, all we have to go by is what was in the staff report, 4 plexes, plus the 2 is a 6-unit building. So I haven't heard you address that at all. I know there's a lot of neighborhoods that are concerned about that. And if we're concerned about maintaining stock for people to buy houses, housing stock, then you can't let somebody come in and turn it all into apartments, because it's not going to work. And these units are not going to be big enough probably to be condos. So I think this is sort of, you know, it's a bit schizophrenic, because it's not really, I'm focusing on that. We've already agreed this proposal does not address affordable housing. There's plenty of evidence that building more housing doesn't make it affordable. So the question is, do we have to get rid of Sacramento's single family neighborhoods in order to, you know, protect renters, owners, and create housing stock? And I would say getting rid of those neighborhoods is antithetical to all of those things.
It's time for closing remarks. Then we'll begin with Maggie and Luree.
Luree, do you want to?
No, Maggie, you're doing this.
Oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've appreciated this opportunity. It's helpful to hear Katie say this is not a done deal. That was certainly not the message that came across on January 19th when the city council voted to accept the staff report with all these rationales in it. Now, we have not gotten into talking about this whole equity business, and that these proposals are supposed to undo the housing discrimination of the 1960s and exclusionary zoning. Exclusionary zoning is a misnomer here. Sacramento never had zoning that was exclusionary. The claim that single family houses, neighborhoods are exclusionary, I would ask you, so what do you do about the people in Southeast Village that live in single family houses? When, if you go to other neighborhoods that are not Land Park, not East Sac, there are lower and moderate income people that live in single family neighborhoods, existing single family neighborhoods. And so you're saying to them, well, we're going to, you know, turn these into multifamily neighborhoods, and somehow that is going to undo the housing discrimination in the 1960s. I mean, that's on its face absurd. And the argument that, you know, everybody's going to come live in Land Park. I mean, and you actually haven't done a lot about this equity argument, which I appreciate. I appreciate your focus on affordable housing. I also want to point out that there is a study that was done by the Embarcadero Institute that says there is evidence that the number of housing units needed in Sacramento and elsewhere in California is widely exaggerated. And this is because of how the calculations were done. I can provide more information about that. So maybe we don't really need the 70,000 housing units that the general plan says we do. And I think Sacramentans should have something to say about how big they want their city to be. I think that's something to let people vote on. Maybe we don't want to be San Francisco or Los Angeles or Manhattan. And I think that's a legitimate thing that needs to go to the voters. And if we're going to get rid of single family zoning, and 90% or there's a huge percentage of single family neighborhoods, then those people should be able to vote on that. And again, I appreciate your being here. Eric Guerra wasn't here. I very much appreciate your being here, and I appreciate the league doing this forum, and I appreciate Luree being here from Upper Land Park.
Thank you, Maggie. Katie, you have 2 minutes.
I had a different set of talking points in mind, but based on what Maggie said, I'm going to go off course a little bit. So there's language in the deeds of some of your homes that I know you're aware of that's thankfully not legally enforceable anymore, that said things like, you cannot sell this home to someone who's not white. And sometimes they would get real specific, and they would basically say, you cannot sell your home to someone who looks like me. And what that meant for families like mine, even though it's long been out of practice, thankfully, is that a lot of people in my family didn't own homes. They didn't build that wealth, right? And what that meant when it came time for me to buy a home, for me to go to school, is that I didn't have that support from my family. We didn't even really know really what that would look like. And so there is a legacy here that's undeniable, and that's not anyone on this call's fault. It's not anyone's fault, but it is built into our environment. And so when we think about equity as a woman of color, as a renter, as a millennial, I have to say very, very firmly that this, in my opinion, does promote equity. And we can argue over the details, and we will, and we can refine the details, and we will. And we can talk about how to protect affordability, how to ensure that people aren't forced to sell their properties, how to ensure that for-profit developers from the Bay don't come in and just start gobbling up houses and bulldozing them. That's all stuff that's fully within our control and that we can do. But we can't silo these things into a bucket. You know, when you mentioned focusing on R1 zoning, it doesn't exist in a silo. It exists in partnership with the affordability policies. It exists in partnership with this unfortunate history and legacy. And this, in my mind, is not the only solution. And that's why I keep saying that, but I do believe it's a part of the solution. I do believe it's important. And I want to repeat a quote that someone sent to me during this call, actually, because I think it's a really good quote that says, "No one is denied the ability to live anywhere if we provide the ability for people to live everywhere." And I think that's what we're going for in Sacramento, is like, how do we really increase opportunity, balance it with the fact that maybe folks don't want to sell or have their homes bulldozed, and really provide a Sacramento that works for all of us. So I thank you for arranging this. I thank all of you for being here. Thank you, League. And I look forward to the continuing conversation.
And the league would like to thank you, Katie, Luree, and Maggie for, Maggie and Luree for hosting this, and for all of you for sharing your views on this topic. It's of incredible interest, and no doubt the conversation will keep going. In fact, I put into the chat for everyone how people can continue to participate in the 2040 general plan update process. It's anticipated to be available for public review this summer, but if you go to this website that you see I put in the chat, you can be updated. Just submit your email and then you'll stay on top of it. And as everyone said, there'll be continued hearings, public hearings. This will be a discussion that goes on for a while. So also want to thank Patricia and Manuel for operating the Zoom, and the League volunteers, Charlene and Claudia. And then I have an announcement to make because we have so many engaged civic-minded folks on this call. I want you all to know, because you're members of neighborhoods, that the League was instrumental with Common Cause in getting our City Independent Redistricting Commission going as part of a good governance package with an ethics commission several years ago. And now the time has come when it's time to redistrict, and the commission has been seated. So please plan to be actively engaged in the public hearings that the commission will be holding, because they'll be determining the 8 city council district boundaries. So your input is really essential. And I couldn't miss this opportunity to tell people who care about their neighborhoods how important it is that you stay engaged. So there'll be tools available to you. You'll be able to draw your own district lines. There's software, real easy software, where you can create your own map if you'd like, and submit it to the commission for review. So please stay on top of that. Now, the League will be closing out this forum, and we hope that those of you who want to stay on and have a conversation, we know our forum is a bit structured and formal and doesn't allow for everybody jumping in and commenting. So have at it. We'll sign off for now. Thank you again for hosting this, and I hope everyone learned something.
Thank you. And Katie, I wanted to invite you to stay. We just wanted to let people, make some actual comments. So where is Patricia? Do you want to unmute?
Here, can I be?
Okay. So how
are we going to do
the best way to let people make comments? Can they raise their hands, or?
I think raise your hand, and then just, I think a 1-minute comment, no rebuttals, no.
All right, all time. Okay.
Okay, but yeah, and no rebuttals, and no, just, yeah. Okay, does that sound good, everyone? I have to unmute everybody though. And
can you see raised hands? You're going to do that, right?
I'm hoping I'll see raised.
So I'm sorry, what was the point of this forum we just had if we're going to have this like open session with Katie?
If you don't want to participate, you don't have to.
people can just make a comment if they wanted to make a comment. It's
Yeah.
what something we just thought of that the people, well, some people have said that they felt like they didn't get to say anything. So here's your chance.
Yeah.
Here's your chance to say something if you'd like. And nobody's going to respond to it necessarily. If you want to ask a question, I guess is that what we decided?
Yeah.
Even in the chat, I think there's been people saying they've been frustrated that they can't say something.
Yeah, so we'll let people raise hands. And just so Katie, so you know, we will copy the chat. So maybe you know how to do that. I'm low tech. So anyway, so why don't you go ahead and call on people, Patricia?
Well, hold on, I'm unmuting everybody. You can mute yourself again if you want to. And if you've had enough, thank you for coming. If you've had enough, that's fine. And if you want to show yourself, that's fine too. And now I actually don't see any raised hands.
Do people know how